Now he said that when he was busy in writing and whenever he was looking up, see, it happens with us also, right? Even with you, when you're writing something and obviously for a second or so you try to look somewhere else also. So little Franz, he started looking some as soon as he was writing, and whenever he was looking up, he noticed that M. Hamel, he was sitting there motionless, means no motion, no activity he was doing, but he was gazing, he was staring at each and everything which he can look from there. Fancy. For 40 years, you need to remember this, for 40 years, he had been there in the same place with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him. So, for 40 years, in 4 decades, 40 years, he had seen various development, various changes there actually. So, he was looking at all those things. He was looking at that window. He was looking at how the class was always there in front of him, right? So we are moving forward here now. Yeah, just a second. Yeah, just like that. Only the desks and benches had been once smooth. The walnut trees in the garden were taller, and the hop vine he had planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all. Poor man. To hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country next day. So he was observing everything, that how desks and benches they become in those 40 years become more smoother, how walnut tree has grown, how hope pine tree was there, then windows. So it was something like broken thing, like 40 years you have spent there and now you need to go somewhere, and not of your own will, but for some external forces. And see, there is only one line mentioned for it, his sister. She was packing the things upstairs, packing their trunks, because next day morning they need to leave that place. So you need to underline that also. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. So he here means M. Hamel. He had the courage. After the writing, we had a lesson in history. So first grammar lesson, then writing and now history. And then the babies chanted. Babies mean the students, those who were sitting there. Ba, bi, bi, boo, boo. So it was like the sounds which we need to make. Down there at the back of the room, old Hauser. You remember that villagers were sitting? So old Hauser was also there. He had the old primer in his hand at that time. See here also, old Hauser. He put on his spectacles and holding his primer in both hands, spelled the letters with them. You could see that he too was crying. His voice trembled with emotion, and it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. Oh, how well I remember it, that the last lesson. So said that when the history class was going on, old Hauser stood up. He had the primer, old primer, that book in his hand, and he started reciting the lesson. His voice was trembling, it was shaking. We wanted to cry, but unfortunately, obviously, we can't cry because it was a very emotional class. But I still remember the things because it was the last lesson. All at once, the church clock struck 12. So it was 12 now. Then the Angelus, so it's a bell, it's like the a time at the church now here. At the same moment, the trumpets of the Prussians returning from drill sounded under our window. So remember when he was coming to the school, he got tempted with the Prussian soldiers drilling. Now they were going back home. M. Hamel stood up, very pale, in his chair. I never saw him look so tall. So he stood up from his chair. He was sitting motionless earlier. My friends, he said. My friends, said he. I. But something choked him. He could not go. He wanted to say something. M. Hamel wanted to speak something, but his voice got choked up. Why? Because he was emotionally broken. Then he turned towards the blackboard. He took a piece of chalk. Bearing on with all his might, he wrote as large as he could, Vive la France. You need to underline. So he wrote those 3 words on the blackboard. He wanted to speak, but unfortunately he was not able to. So he wrote, Vive la France. It basically means, long live France. Please write down. This is very, very important to understand. Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall. And without a word, he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed. You may go. So when he wrote Long live France, Vive la France here, he stopped. He leaned towards the wall. Without speaking, he just made a gesture that school is dismissed. Because 12, the time was 12. So the time is over. School is dismissed and you all may go. And there, that episode, that scene, the last lesson thing which happened, that emotional breakdown thing happened, it was closed down there. So I really hope it's clear to you. If you're still having any doubts, please confirm it from me, clear it out, and rest we will continue tomorrow. Thank you. God bless you all.